Said, you go to some highly academic schools and the kids are like zombies. Adding that children must learn human skills. He'll be joining me to explain which skills they might be. And arts editor of The Express, Stefan Kyriazis, will be here to tell me of his theatrical adventures. He's been to see James Corden, who's making his grand return to the London stage. And before all of that, your news headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Michael. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 11. Our top stories this hour. The Prime Minister is warning that Sir Keir Starmer could inflict irreversible damage on the UK within 100 days of entering Downing Street. In an interview for the Sunday Telegraph, Rishi Sunak warned that Labour's tax plans would bankrupt people in every generation. However, Labour says its first steps would be restoring economic stability and cutting NHS waiting lists. The attacks come as the party continues to lead the Tories in the polls by around 20 points ahead of Thursday's election. Pat McFadden, Labour's national campaign coordinator, told us Labour has been clear on tax.
Nothing in our plans that requires
Why can't you rule it out now,
tax
then?
increases.
OK, how about this? Will you increase council tax or reband council tax?
Well, there's already, under the Tory plans, an assumption that council tax will go up under their plans.
OK, so will it go up under a Labour government?
There's nothing in our plans that requires council tax to go up.
Will you tax people's homes?
There is nothing in our plans that requires us to do this.
Can you rule out taxing people more to drive a car or to put petrol and diesel into a car? Can you rule that out?
There's nothing in our plans that requires us to do that. Now,
OK, so nothing in our plans and ruling things out are two different things.
Nigel Farage will address the largest mass meeting of Reform Party supporters later today. The event at the Birmingham NEC is expected to welcome an audience of up to 5,000. Mr Farage has described the vote on Thursday as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rebuild broken Britain. It comes at the end of a difficult week for the Reform leader, who has dealt with multiple allegations about the behaviour of his candidates and activists. Earlier, he told GB News it's been challenging.
I've been leader of this for a month, OK? I inherited a start-up party that had almost no money and almost no staff and said, volunteer, we want candidates. So we have finished up with some people who were rotten. I tried to fix it by getting a well-known, prominent, ex-number 10 man who had a vetting company. We gave him 144 grand. He didn't do the job. So we have finished up with some people who are truly dreadful. I apologise for that, but it's not reflective of me and it's not reflective of the party.
The Lib Dems are pledging to give patients the legal right to see a GP within a week if they win the general election. Leader Sir Ed Davey also says that patients would be guaranteed cancer treatment within 2 months of a diagnosis. It's part of a new Patients' Charter, which would enshrine new rights into the NHS Constitution. It also aimed to bolster access to urgent appointments, ensuring that anyone in need sees a GP within 24 hours. Police in Greater Manchester have shot and killed an XL bully dog after it attacked a woman. And a warning, some viewers may find the following video distressing. Footage shared on social media shows officers firing at the dog multiple times as it ran through a residential street in Eccles. Officers were called to reports of a dangerous and out-of-control dog on Friday night after members of the public had failed to contain the animal. The victim is still receiving treatment and 2 men were arrested after confronting officers. Well, in the United States, the White House is pushing back on reports that President Biden plans to discuss the future of his campaign with his family at Camp David today. It's after a report by NBC News, which quoted several unnamed sources, alleging that some senior party members are pushing for the president to stand aside following his performance in a televised debate against Donald Trump. But officials say the trip was planned before the debate and denied that there was any serious discussion about the president standing down. England will face off against Slovakia later in Euro 2024 last 16 action. The two sides go head-to-head with a quarter-final place against Switzerland at stake. Harry Kane has claimed he will be at peak sharpness as he looks to find the back of the net, having only scored once in 3 games. The England captain said he believes the players come into their sharpness at the knockout stage.
naturally you get physically stronger, naturally you get sharper as you play more games. So we've had 3 games in a short space of time. So I feel like not just for me, but a lot of the players come into their peak sharpness at the knockout stage, and that's what I've found in especially recent tournaments as well. So yeah, look, being the striker in the team, obviously I want to score goals and help the team get through to the next round.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Ray Addison. More in an hour's time. Back to Michael.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Ray Addison. There are very few days left before the polls close on July the 4th, and many of us have already voted. According to all polls, Labour will win. But much of the campaign has been about a party with no seats, which may win no seats, Reform. Sorry, they do actually have 1 seat now, I think about it. Labour and Conservative have joined together to attack a party that allegedly harbours racists. So why so much fuss about an also-ran party? Perhaps because there could be 100 Conservative candidates whose fate hangs on how well Reform does. Under Britain's first-past-the-post electoral system, what matters is how the ballots in each constituency fracture between the contending parties. Where Reform does well, for example, it could be that a mediocre score by the Labour candidate is enough for victory. And if Tories are nervous, so are the pollsters, because measuring the Reform vote is difficult. It didn't exist in 2019, when we last had a general election, so how can we track variations from a baseline that doesn't exist? Will the pollsters fall flat on their algorithms? I have with me the political correspondent for The Spectator, James Heal, and the former Labour advisor and political commentator, Stella Shansikidou. It's lovely to see you both. Welcome to GB News. Stella, have you on the left been intrigued by the performance of Reform UK? I mean, it seemed to me like kind of the only story in this campaign that party has put on a fair number of percentage points. And could you also tell me whether you think that the 2 sort of scandals that Reform UK has been involved in, one is the references to Putin that were made by Nigel Farage. The second has been the exposure of this alleged canvasser whose first name is Andrew. Do you think they've set Reform back? Do you think they've peaked? Do you think their number would go down between now and polling day?
Intrigued. Michael, I've been underwhelmed. They're doing exactly as I expected them to do. Nigel Farage is, very good at marketing. That's why he's saying that Reform is a startup party. But they're deeply unserious, and that is why they get the candidates that they have. They don't have the establishment backing, sure, but they also don't really have a concrete set of policies. I don't think they're doing better than any of the other populist or smaller parties in other European countries. I would expect them to be doing better if they are to overtake the Conservative Party. I think that a lot of the support that they're getting right now is going to decrease after the elections, depending on how they do, because I think that they are getting the protest vote. I don't think that they're going to be able to develop that kind of base, and it's exactly because of the issues that you mentioned, right, with Russia, for example, because Nigel Farage is trying to appeal to people who want to defend Western values and who want someone who is going to be on their own side, and that he comes out and he has some deeply, deeply unpopular ideas for the British public. So I do not see how he's going to manage to actually have an electoral basis that would be workable, not just in the first-past-the-post system in the UK, but frankly in any European country.
How can you be underwhelmed by a party which is well ahead of the Liberal Democrats, our traditional third party, and which may get more votes than the Conservatives? And on this point about the vetting of canvassers and so on, nowadays this needs resource. If you're going to do criminal checks and you're going to check people's Twitter and so on, this costs hundreds of thousands of pounds. And I want to put it to viewers, actually, that the situation we're now in is that people on the whole don't want to give money to political parties, but they want political parties somehow to have the resources to vet every Tom, Dick and Harry who walks in to help them deliver leaflets.
Am I supposed to have sympathy for a man who wants to be prime minister of one of the greatest countries in the world in 5 years' time? Because he can't find the money. He can't find the money. I'll tell you why I don't worry about reform votes surging. Because it's a protest vote, and I'm Greek, and I have seen this happen again, and it's going to happen again in this country. And let me tell you something. If the centrists manage to overtake the far right in Greece, okay, people get offended when I call them far right. They're right, whatever they want to call it. The populist right. If the centrists manage to overtake the populist right in Greece, they are 100% going to do that in a country that is as obsessed with status and the establishment as the UK is. Because you know what? No right-winger in the UK wants to be someone who is in a third, fourth party. They all want to be conservatives. That's what they all want to be. That's what Nigel Farage wants. He wants to be taken seriously, and he's failing.
I think you're right on that last point. He wants to be taken seriously. He wants to be seen as a future Prime Minister. Have you been on the right, James, more impressed, less underwhelmed by Nigel Farage? I mean, as I say, as we talk at the moment, it's possible that they'll get more votes than the Conservatives.
Yes, I think that you also see the clear difference between him and Richard Tice as leader. As soon as Nigel Farage came back, you see this jump from around 13, 14 points in the polls to around 17, 18 now. And that clearly is down to Farage's personality. He's done something that no one else has been able to do in British politics. I would say he's up there with sort of Joseph Chamberlain as one of the great change makers of British political history right now. He's someone who's done this again and again at things like the 2019 Euros elections, came top of that poll. First time any of the other two main parties had come top of a national poll in this country. And he's done something again in this campaign. I think the key thing, of course, though, is what you're saying there in the earlier questions is about the last week or so. And I do think Reform have had a few missteps, backsteps, I think, on Russia and I think some of the vetting row. And they chose to lean into them. They tried to go after Channel 4, very critical of that. I think that was a mistake. And I think that actually you've seen some of the polls maybe drop off slightly. So although we were talking earlier...
Have we?
I think we have seen in the last couple of days or so. There's been a few which have dropped off. And I think that talking to pollsters, they think it'll be around, more 15% rather than 20% that it could have been.
You think it was a mistake to lean into the Channel 4 thing? I mean, what Nigel Farage is alleging is that this man, Andrew, is an actor. Well, I think that's pretty well established. He's an actor. The significance of that is still in dispute. But, I mean, clearly what he's implying is that there's some kind of setup here that he's going to get to the bottom of. Now, I mean, that raised in my doubt a question mark as to whether the story was right, whether it was rigorous journalism. I'm not saying it isn't, but it's raised a question mark. Why do you think it was wrong to lean into that?
I think that you can suggest this man is a fantasist or whatever without suggesting there was a kind of conspiracy behind it. And I think you can do that in a way which says Channel 4 maybe got mistakes wrong, made a misstep here, rather than actually talking about sort of the insinuations around a paid actor or something like that. I think that was perhaps overreach. And I'd only say that, for instance, when they were sort of putting out media, statements about saying that they're going to refer this to the Electoral Commission, the Electoral Commission came out yesterday and said they hadn't had any such letter yet. So I think that all I'd just say is that, it's sometimes better to dismiss these things. I do think he's right to say you can't expect the leader to be held accountable for everything an activist says on the doorstep, while also just moving on and kind of focusing on a key message and punching that Tory bruise endlessly on migration, which previously worked so well for them.
You move in Tory circles. Do you think I was right or wrong to say that there might be 100 Tory candidates who are nervous that because of Reform's performance, either Reform might win their seat or Labour might win their seat or indeed Liberal Democrat might win their seat, but the fracturing of the vote is dangerous to Conservative candidates? Massively more so. I think 2015, if you look at the breakdown, I think about half of UKIP's vote then half was from Labour, half from Conservative. So it hurt the Labour in the north, hurt Tories in the south. What we're seeing now more is that vote coming more from the Conservatives than Labour. And the danger for that, of course, is that it disproportionately affects them. And I think it's the worst of all worlds for the Conservatives. They've got the Liberal Democrats in the south, Labour in the north, Reform hurting them all across the country. And that's going to be fascinating when we have the, the autopsy of what happens after 4th of July. And people are saying, do we move more in a Reform direction? Do we move in a Liberal Democrat direction? All these things. I think a Reform good showing is more likely to kind of strengthen the hand of people who say we should put Nigel Farage in the party and embrace Reform's position on different things like tax and migration. Stella, do you have a feeling about the polls? And what's interesting me about the polls, obviously they've all said that Labour is going to win. Then we've had these polls which, instead of having a sample of 1,000 or 2, have had samples of 18 to 20,000, which use this methodology which is called MRP, in which supposedly you can attribute the characteristics of the voters. And these are gathered in some detail, and then you apply them to voters in individual constituencies. So you can even generate projections of individual constituency results. Now, these polls have been done, and of course, they all show a Labour victory, but the range of Tory seats has been between, what, about 50 and 150, something like that, which is quite a broad range. I wonder whether the pollsters are pretty nervous, and I wonder what kind of behaviour the pollsters are engaging in at the moment, because a pollster perhaps doesn't mind being wrong if everybody's wrong, but a pollster hates being out on a limb and wrong.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that there is far too much polling going on. And I think the reason why there is far too much polling is because there is a market for it, because new polls every week basically give us something to talk about when there aren't any new policies, and there isn't any willingness, frankly, to discuss policies in detail. Arithmetically, it doesn't look like they're going to be wrong. I don't think you're going to have a situation like in 1992 where, they were off by 9 points, because for the very simple reason that the polling, as you said, they're using a much more sophisticated method now. If anything, do I expect the vote to be consolidated around the Tories a tiny bit more by the time we have the elections? Perhaps I do. I still believe the side Tory thing. I still think it's a thing. I still think there are people who are embarrassed to say that they're going to vote for the Tories. I don't think that's going to mean that there is going to be a hung parliament or anything like that whatsoever. I think Labour is going to have an overwhelming victory. But I think one trend that we haven't discussed as much is that while we may be obsessed with the polling when we're talking about on political shows and on podcasts and on the radio and all of that, the average voter still hasn't caught up to this. I was on the doorstep the other week. I was canvassing in Loughborough, and I was canvassing someone who seemed very eloquent, well-educated, middle-class person, and they were going to vote for the Labour Party, and they seemed very deflated. And I was like, why is this, what's wrong with you? And he said, I don't think they're going to win. Labour never wins. And I was like, no, you wait. You stick it out, you'll see.
And Stella, thank you very much for a report from the doorstep. We don't actually hear very much about that. I'll just comment that, I think you're entirely right. The politicians have wanted to avoid talking about issues very largely. And sitting here at this desk, to be able to talk about the polls has been a godsend, because there's been so little else to talk about. Stella there was talking about more sophisticated polling methods, and she kind of implied that was necessarily a good thing. Are you a tiny bit suspicious? I'm a little bit suspicious about these new methodologies. And I think the pollsters must be a bit nervous.
I think they are a little bit nervous. I think if you look at the range, as you were saying there, you've seen some MRP polls putting the Tories around 50, others up to 150. So we're talking, difference between near wipeout and a 1997-style result. I think it'll probably come down the middle somewhere, but there's a sort of scattergun approaches in there with all the different findings that have been out there. The key thing, of course, is, the difficulties in trying to get a lot of these things right, which is that, how much will tactical voting be an element of this? We've got a much more sophisticated electorate when it comes to things like looking up online who you're going to be voting for to get the Tories out, reform as well. And I think that they'll just be happy with a couple of points off. Remember, even in 1997, they kind of overestimated the Labour vote for the polling, and it was actually down a couple of points on the night itself. So I think that it'll be out by a few points, but I think that, as long as no one has too much egg on their face, I imagine as an industry they'll be OK.
I've told this anecdote before, but the Sunday before I was defeated, a poll was done in my constituency that showed me only 3 points ahead of Labour, and therefore it was obvious that the Liberal Democrats should switch their votes if they wanted to defeat me. Now, in that case, all those years ago, someone had to go and conduct a poll in my constituency. But, of course, now, through MRP, that sort of information is available in every constituency. And so the ambitious tactical voter has the data at his or her fingertips.
Absolutely, and I think you see a lot more of that kind of campaigning. You see a lot more sort of leaflets going out and social media saying they can't win here. And also there's almost a kind of unspoken pact between the Liberals and the Labour, I think, which is that they often direct resources where they need to go. And you've seen it very effectively in by-elections over the last 4 years or so. And I think that, having it as a sort of online election really makes a massive difference. And we've seen a lot of that kind of stuff in the few days leading up, saying, don't vote for this candidate here, vote for this one here.
Stella and James, I'm going to ask you to ruin your Sundays even more by staying on in the studio and joining me again afternoon, where we might be discussing whether the British election is very different from the French or whether we're seeing symptoms of the same thing, which I think is quite an intriguing subject. James Heal and Stella Shantikizou. After the break, having rung in the summer months for more than 250 years, the Royal Academy of Arts Summer Exhibition in London is the world's oldest open-entry art show. This year, the critics haven't been enthused. Should we care about the critics, the so-called experts, or should we celebrate artistic populism? Art critic and expert J.J. Charlesworth will be here. Stay with me.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
So, question is, what can we do to get young people to eat healthy food? Here's dietitian and nutrition consultant Helen Bond. Helen, what do you think?
Eating habits formed at this age tend to persist into later life. We know we're eating too much fat, sugar, salt, and not enough of the good things like fibre, fruits and vegetables, all of those things. So yes, we need to help this age group so they have the skill set and they have the nutrition knowledge to take that forward.
Do you agree that it is impossible to eat healthily on a budget and quickly as well, or do you have any sort of fail-safe, affordable and very quick to prep meals that you'd recommend youngsters try?
It doesn't have to be expensive either, but you have to have those kind of cost-cutting hacks and those time-saving things in the kitchen. Make use, I always say, of things like peas, beans and lentils, which are a type of pulse, very inexpensive compared to meat, and yet they double up as one of your 5 a day, and also a great source of plant-based protein. If you overget a milk as something, you have too much milk, maybe make some lattes.
I just wanted to throw a shoe at the TV, really, because was there nothing else on or nothing else available? The point being, there is an audience, there's obviously an appeal, there's obviously people are watching this stuff. So what are they doing? Are they watching and not cooking?
I think that's it. They're watching and maybe enjoying all the cookery programs like I do. And I'm a typical person in the kitchen. I must have about 100 cookbooks. But sometimes when you are time poor, you've got to feed a family or you've got to feed yourself and everything, you don't really know where to start. And I think that's why apps and having things online for this younger audience makes it much more accessible. Start with one recipe and build it up from there. Like I said,
The People's Channel.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The Royal Academy's annual exhibition has returned for the 256th time to brighten the summer holidays. It's the world's oldest open submission exhibition. Anyone can enter work to be considered for inclusion. This year we can see more than 1,200 works by amateurs, professionals and academicians, in other words, members of the Academy, covering media from painting to photography and sculpture to film. Most of the works are available for purchase, with the proceeds supporting the artists and the Royal Academy's charitable endeavours. Whilst the works have to pass through a committee, it could be argued that this body of creativity represents an unusual expression of popular taste, relatively unfiltered by experts, relatively immune to prevailing fads or groupthink. Might that account for the poor reviews? Or maybe it's just not very good. I'm joined now by art critic JJ Charlesworth for his verdict. What is your verdict?
My verdict is you should go and see it, and you should make up your own mind. And I think what's really interesting about the summer exhibition is it's quite unusual amongst big exhibitions in big galleries, especially public galleries in London, because you are confronted with many things of varying quality, selected by artists, and you very much, instead of being given something to you that's supposed to be good, you have to make your own decision. So that's my verdict is there's quite a lot of stuff there. Every year it's over sort of 1,500. I think this year it's 1,700.
Yeah, when I was reading that, I thought it was a higher number than that, more like 1,700 pieces. It's really amazing. And the Royal Academy has some beautiful, huge rooms.
Yeah.
And the walls are covered absolutely from top to bottom. And then there are installations in the middle of the room and so on. So, I mean, I went along yesterday and 2 observations, even though it was quite difficult to get there yesterday because of the Gay Pride March, so you had to fight your way across Piccadilly to get into the Royal Academy. It was hugely well attended. You can tell by red stickers that are placed next to the paintings whether they've sold or not. The vast majority had sold. People seem to be having a really good time. I mean, maybe even because some of it was bad, although apparently good enough to sell on the whole, you know, people were debating with each other whether they liked it or not. And you go into a room, is this a good room or a bad room? So it just seemed to me to give a lot of pleasure and a lot of joy.
I mean, it's also important to kind of realise that it's not a free-for-all, right?
Yes.
Although there's a lot of work, it's selected by, as you say, Royal Academicians who make a selecting committee each year, and that changes. And there is taste and judgment and critical judgment going on. So there are rooms in there. I thought this year in particular, something which was very overlooked by a lot of the critics who were all giving the whole thing 1 star. I don't know why, but it seems to be the habit now is to trash the summer show. But there are there are rooms by painter Herman Andersen who'd selected works that were mostly a lot of painting, but had a theme around everyday life and people getting on with their lives. It was very touching and interesting selection. There was also the next room by Anne Desmet, who selected a lot of work which was to do with the urban environment and architecture in the city. And you really got a very strong sense from these selections because you realised that here's an artist who's really enjoying other artists' work. So there's that kind of democratic, I wouldn't say quite democratic, but there's a very open and generous aspect to that element of the summer show. It lets people in who would not necessarily get the shows in the big West End galleries, and it allows people to think and rethink what their opinion is of certain kinds of styles and ways of making art.
I mean, I personally did see some pictures on the wall that I thought were absolutely stunning. I'm going to mention Peter Ucker, Uncle John Bull. I don't know whether we can possibly see that on the screen. Not at the moment, anyway. And then Ben Jonson. That's the Peter Ucker there, which I think is a remark. And now these are the 2 by Ben Jonson. Grundtvig 1, and we've got one coming out of Berlin Pool. I think that's an absolutely stunning piece of work. And then Claire Douglas should be up. Here we are, Claire Douglas.
Yes.
Souvenir from the Anthropocene.
Yeah.
That last one, actually, a very witty painting, slightly reminded me of, I think, Grace Imperial style. Lots and lots of little incidents going on in that picture which illustrate sort of modern Britain. Now, these ones did not have red stickers by them. I think that one did, actually, but the other 3 that I mentioned did not have a red sticker by them for the very good reason that they were selling for tens of thousands of pounds.
Yes,
so
yes.
There were some important works in there.
I think some people price not to sell. Or they have a very high opinion of themselves, perhaps. I don't know. I'm not sure. Certainly a lot of the Royal... You see who's a Royal Academician or who is a very established artist because suddenly you're talking tens of thousands, not hundreds of pounds. But a piece like that was really interesting. I think it caught a lot of people's eyes because it had very kind of humorous, slightly bleak take on post-Brexit Britain. It's set in this fictitious world of Brummington, which is a sort of loose satire on Birmingham. I thought it was a bit mean, to be honest. But
we had stop oil activists running around. I think we had maybe Black Lives Matter. We had Boris Johnson. I think our own Jacob Rees-Mogg made his way into the painting.
Yeah, so there's definitely a slant, a political slant on the part of the artist. But even that said, I thought it was an interesting and enjoyable work, even though maybe you don't agree with the artist on what they're trying to say. And I think that actually made for an interesting moment because you're seeing that people are disagreeing, right? Both through the artwork and in front of artworks. I think that really is something that I think possibly we're starting to miss in big museum shows because it's so top-down, it's so also quite monocultural. A lot of the big exhibitions that we see now follow certain themes. Curators are kind of tending towards work which has kind of social or political messages to make, but they tend to be of a certain type. So, you know, the number of shows that are about the environment that have been in public galleries in London in last year and across the country, you know, there's quite a lot of this. It's becoming quite repetitive, right? And it's always one particular take on that theme. So I think there is something to be said at the moment for seeing lots of different artists' work who are not part of the art world or the art establishment, showing what they do for their own interest and for their own enjoyment.
Also, I imagine that for many people, this is their introduction to the possibility of buying original art. I mean, many people decorate, their first flat with a print. But then there comes a point in your life maybe where you'd like to have some original art. May not be the best piece of art in the world, may only cost, a couple of £100, but it's original and you want it and it means something to you. And I think this exhibition really plays an important role in that, don't you imagine?
I think it's good to see that, many well-established artists actually can be affordable, especially if you're looking to buy, say, a print or an edition work off them. I think it's also interesting that when you see artworks by artists who are used to showing in very empty, big galleries, their work gets sort of brought down a notch. So, in all the clutter and all the kind of cacophony of being surrounded by lots and lots of other artists' work, you actually start to see artists who are well known with a little less of that kind of hallowed reverence and prestige surrounding, which always is an effect of having big white galleries with only a few works in them. And so that's a very good antidote to a bit too much of the false respect one should pay to artists who sell for lots of money.
I would not say for a moment that it's a great show. I think I might give it more than 1 star, but I would say this. I thought the people there were really enjoying themselves. I really enjoyed myself. I would recommend that people should go to it, and I think it runs for a few weeks yet.
Indeed, so the rest of the summer. I'm not quite sure exactly when.
No, but plenty of time for people to go and see it. Although, judging by the number of red dots that were up yesterday, not much chance to buy. A lot of the art has already been sold. Thank you very much indeed, JJ Charlesworth. Coming up, should children be taught more human skills at school? And what might they be? Headmaster of Epsom College, Sir Anthony Selden, will be here to discuss. Stay with us.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So it's a bit of a cloudy start for some of us, but there is some sunshine on the way as we head through the rest of today. We've seen a band of rain pushing its way eastwards overnight, and that eventually clears its way towards the southeast through this morning, leaving plenty of sunshine for much of England and Wales this afternoon. Still remaining quite showery across parts of Scotland, and we will see some showers bubbling up, particularly northeast England through this afternoon, one of these turning heavy in places. But for Northern Ireland, southwest Wales and southwest England, definitely seeing the best of the sunshine this afternoon, and highs perhaps a touch lower than yesterday, 22 or 23 in the south, and those mid to high teens further north. So those showery conditions do continue for the rest of the evening, particularly across parts of Scotland, and remaining quite cloudy here too through the rest of Sunday evening. Perhaps western Scotland seeing some late sunshine, but generally staying much cloudier further east. For Northern Ireland, there will be some sunshine around, particularly western parts of Northern Ireland, and Northern England too seeing some sunny spells, but those scattered showers do continue through the evening and into the overnight period. For much of England and Wales, though, there will be some sunny spells between those showers and feeling pleasant in any sunshine into the evening. So overnight, the showers do eventually ease, but still remaining a little wet across parts of Scotland. And then Western Scotland and Northern Ireland see this next band of rain arriving through the early hours of the morning. Elsewhere, generally staying dry overnight with plenty of clear spells, and under those clear spells we could see temperatures in rural spots dropping down into the mid-single figures, but generally staying a little milder in the towns and cities under all that cloud and rain. So that rain then continues to push its way eastwards as we go through Monday morning, turning particularly heavy across western parts of Scotland through the start of Monday. Southeast England holding on to the sunshine through the morning, and then it's western parts of Wales, southwest England and Northern Ireland that's likely to see the best of the sunshine through the afternoon. Temperatures again similar to Sunday, likely to see highs of 21 or 22 in the south and those mid to high teens further north.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The current British curriculum and examination system are equipping children with skills that will always be formed better by artificial intelligence, a headmaster has warned, as he called for education to prioritise what it means to be human. He goes on to highlight that there's a lack of opportunities to learn human skills for children nowadays. We're not prioritising what it means to be human. You go to some highly academic schools and the kids are like zombies, he says. Now, what can this mean? Joining me now is this outspoken headmaster of Epsom College, Sir Anthony Selden.
Greetings.
Anthony, marvellous to see you. How are you?
Very good, thank you, Michael.
Welcome to GB News. What are these human skills that are AI-proof?
So the skills that will make for a happy, productive career at work, a happy and successful life, social life, of being good members of the community. I mean, surely we should be worried by the rise of mental problems amongst young people. We should be worried by the fact that employers say that the narrow focus on A-levels and GCSEs do not equip young people for the world of work. They don't give them the ability to work with each other, to be creative, to be active rather than passive thinkers, to be imaginative, to be collaborative, to be problem solvers. So, look, I think exams are important, but I think we've allowed them to become all important, and we've allowed them to dominate every aspect of what schools are about. And surely we should be concerned that AI will always be better and quicker at performing the linear cognitive processing skills. I mean, look at medicine. Look at so many professions where many of the aspects of work are already being performed better. Airline pilots. What we need are people who can understand other people, empathy, the social skills, the ability to connect, the ability actually to know what's right from wrong, the ability to know what's good from bad. These skills could be taught alongside the exam skills, the knowledge-rich curriculum, very easily. And they are in the best state schools and independent schools. They need to be in every school.
Anthony, do you envisage a world in which there's any work? I mean, for example, do you think that a headmaster or a television presenter are AI-proof? Will these jobs exist in the future?
Oh, Michael, that's very pointed. I mean, in other words, will you and I be out of jobs?
Yes.
Well, that's a scary thought, isn't it?
Well, I mean, you've set the bar.
It's not that there won't be the jobs. There will be the jobs, but that the hard processing, the detailed calculation aspects of the work. I mean, look at the lives of the work of surgeons or the work of many high-skilled work. The detailed work can be done by the machines quicker, better, at just a million times the speed of human beings. The concern is, are we doing enough to teach empathy, the human connectedness? So, of course, there'll need to be television presenters, there'll need to be teachers. Indeed, we might well need more teachers. But the heavy lifting of teaching, the dull, repetitive work of marking, which is and lesson preparation, that can be done and switched over, as our group AI in Education is showing, to the technology, leaving more time for young people to engage on a one-to-one basis with adults and with each other. So the nature of schools and indeed universities are going to be completely transformed in the next 10 and 15 years with that shift towards interpersonal contact, which frankly has been deprioritized at school, as has character education, the building of good character. I mean, what is education worth if it's not about teaching people to be good human beings and to have the virtues and values which will allow them to lead good lives? This can be done alongside that detailed work.
I don't doubt much of what you say. I think I'm just wondering whether you're being radical enough. I mean, let's take a TV presenter. Artificial intelligence could have someone in front of you now, wouldn't be a real person, but that figure would not fluff the autocue as I do. That figure would have, artificial intelligence would have scanned all of your books. And I know there are scores of your books, but artificial intelligence would know about all those books and would be able to pluck thoughts that you had 10 years ago and present them to challenge your point of view. You see, I just wonder whether there are going to be any jobs at all, which would not invalidate your point, but it would just mean you're not being quite radical enough.
Well, Michael, it's difficult to imagine anyone doing the job better than you. But, I mean, prove to us that this isn't, in fact, the Michael Portillo bot. Can you do that?
How would I prove that?
Well, while you're thinking on that, let me just answer. The concern, Michael, is that the value and the interest is stripped out of the jobs. Look at London taxi drivers. They're still driving us around, but what gave them the meaning in their life, the pleasure, the satisfaction, was the knowledge, knowing all the streets and all the addresses in London. Now it's better done, as we all know, by the AI technology. The same as for black cab drivers in London, the same is true for many jobs. We have to fight to keep what makes jobs satisfying, worthwhile. Think of, the hierarchy of needs, that sense that you're doing something meaningful and valuable. And only human beings are going to be able to prioritize that in jobs. And I do hope that the Keir Starmer government, if it is going to be a Keir Starmer government, are going to take AI seriously. The Conservatives, just in the last year or two, have started doing it. But my goodness, this is number one priority. It's up there, Michael, with climate change. I agree with you.
Thank you.
You still haven't given the answer. Is this the real Michael Portillo, or is this a bot?
I am the real one, but I still don't know how I could prove it to you. But I thank you very warmly, Anthony Selden.
I believe you.
I could say that you and I go back for years, so maybe that's proof that I'm not a bot. And by the way, when we programme those taxi drivers, I hope that they continue to have intriguing political views, as they always have in the past. Still ahead, it's nearly time to take to the stage with Stefan Kyriazis to hear about the man who came to fame through Gavin and Stacey and wowed the United States with a Late Late Show.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tormini.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
So there was a calf that was run down by a Surrey police car. It's now being nursed back to health, according to the family who own the farm that the calf escaped from.
Well, he didn't just run him over once, he ran him over twice.
No, we're not showing you the footage. The footage is really shocking. But the police officer who was driving this vehicle has now been taken off frontline duties until a full investigation is completed. And I feel like I'm yet again the only person in the country who thinks the police officer was just doing his job. That police officer, probably a young guy who's got dual carriageways left, right and centre in that area. Do you know what the most popular business is in that area in Feltham?
Farming.
McDonald's drive-through. It's got a queue round the block anytime you go around that area. And all those people queuing for McDonald's who are now outraged that this poor cow had to die.
Because it's going to be at McDonald's at some point.
At some point, he was going to die. I'm really sorry. If you eat meat, you can't be upset by a cow dying. I think the fast roads with cars at 10 o'clock at night in the dark, they're not expecting a cow to walk out in the middle of the night. There would have been a massive pile-up. Then there'd been, like, who knows how many people dead. And then the police would have been criticised for not neutralising the threat.
The thing is, it was because he did... why... You could see the first time, the calf could barely stand up. I just don't get why I had to then go and do it a second time.
Well, I suppose at that point it's a bit like if you run over like a deer on the side of the road, you know, and if the police they're going to kill the animal to put it out of its misery. That's all I can presume. And the guy's not trained. This is Feltham. It isn't Texas. He's not going to come out with a lasso. He doesn't know what to do.
Where did this happen, Feltham?
Feltham. I'm sure the inbox is now going to be full of people saying, "Bev, you're outrageous. You lack compassion."
No, there will be people who agree with you. But if it had been done once, that was enough. But I don't think it needed to do it the second time.
GB News, the People's Channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, quite a drizzly start, but we will see some sunshine breaking through the cloud with temperatures around about average. Plenty of rain and drizzle across the southeast where we see this frontal system eventually clear its way through. And then we do see a ridge of high pressure building, which means generally settled conditions for the afternoon. Through the course of Sunday then, quite a cloudy picture for most of us, but it will be largely dry. Though we will start to see some showers break out across northern parts of England. Nothing particularly heavy though. And later into the afternoon we'll see some sunshine break through that cloud with the best of the temperatures across the southeast. Highs of 22, maybe even 23 Celsius as we see the sunshine break through. Now, through the course of the evening then, we will start to see some sunshine, particularly across parts of Devon and Cornwall, but elsewhere, a fair amount of cloud around, largely dry though. A few showers still across northern England, not really easing away until later into the night, and then some sunshine poking through that cloud across Northern Ireland. Through Scotland, still plenty of cloud around, a few showers feeding into the Northern Isles, but for most, plenty of dry weather around to end the weekend. Into the evening, a bit of a change as we start to see some outbreaks of rain push their way in from the west. Once again, nothing particularly heavy, but it will lead to quite a damp morning for some of us to start the new working week. Elsewhere, though, largely dry, a mix of cloud and some clear spells. Where you do catch those prolonged clear spells, feeling a little bit cooler than of late, but most towns and cities holding into the double figures. For Monday then, generally quite an unsettled picture. We'll see those outbreaks of rain continue to push their way across parts of England, staying largely dry across central and southern England, just some patchy areas of rain at times. But once again, the best of the temperatures across the southeast, highs of 21, possibly even 22, depending on how much sunshine breaks through.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome back. Stefan Kyriazis has, as ever, been to the theatre and saw one of the most successful performers of the modern age, one who has made his name in different genres on television and is always a magnetic presence on the stage. About whom are we talking, Stefan?
We're talking about James Corden, although I'd also like to point out it's very exciting that the audience also had me on stage, which I think we have a picture of somewhere. There we go. So that's so basically we're at the Old Vic for The Constituent, and it's Traverse staging. So audience on either side. And it's actually the first time I've ever done that, where I've sat on the stage part of the audience. And it's a fantastic experience. But also it's been done this time to bring everything in a lot and make it quite intimate, because you just have one simple set. It's just a table, office space. And it's basically, this is a new play by Joe Penhall, and it's addressing very, very current issues of safety, especially for people in public service, doctors, nurses, teachers, and of course, as you know, politicians that are at risk and being attacked. So we have Joe Cox, Sir David Amess, and we have politicians talking about cancelling their surgeries, not wanting to appear in public, teachers being threatened. So this is a very simple setup that explores all of this. And James Corden plays an ex-serviceman who is going through a difficult divorce, dealing with a lot of PTSD, also feeling very much like fathers are overlooked, and he wants to fight for their rights. And an old school friend is a local MP, played by Anna Maxwell Martin. And he goes in to start talking to her, and it starts off quite chummy and jovial, and then it darkens and darkens. He gets quite aggressive and frustrated. She wants to help. She's an absolute idealist. This politician sense of, we don't choose who we work for. You know, we are here by duty to work for everybody in our constituency. It spirals a lot. I have to say, Corden, sensational. Really? He really is a fantastic actor. Of all of them, he's so natural, and he has the most difficult role where his character is shifting all the time and becomes potentially quite threatening and dangerous, but then there's also a beautiful catharsis at the end. So I'm very impressed by this. I loved it. It gets a little bit sitcom-y and a little bit baggy in places, considering how heavy the themes are, but it addresses social media. You know, you can't say anything now without being terrified of what the responses are going to be. And also this sense of duty and still somehow idealism and hope. So I think it's a really interesting, powerful
very
piece.
Good and interesting timing, coinciding with the election. And
yes,
you said it was
absolutely.
At the Old Vic.
That's at the Old Vic at the moment.
Now we've got something else that touches on mental health.
Yes, we have. Next to Normal. Now, this is a show that I love, 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 love. And it only recently made it to the UK, 15 years or so after being on Broadway and winning lots of awards. And this is about a family in crisis. And very much, we've got a little clip, but to set it up, there's a mother who is pretty much melting down. The daughter feels very overlooked, and the son is clearly the favourite, the darling, but there's something menacing and unsettling going on. It takes a while for us to discover. We've got a gorgeous clip that I wanted to show of the three of them singing just in a studio.
Superboy and the invisible girl, he's the one you wish would appear. He's your hero, forever your son. He's not here, I am here. That's not true. You're our little pride and joy, our perfect plan. You know I love you. I love you as much as I can. Take a look at the invisible girl. Here she is, clear as the day. Please look closely and find her before she fades away. Superboy and the invisible girl, son of steel and daughter of air.
OK, so the extraordinary thing is this play about mental health is a musical.
It is a musical, and it's a rock musical, which the cast have all talked about, the fact that the music is almost like your feelings kind of being thrown at you. There's so much going on in this family, so much turbulence, so much pain and grief, which we slowly discover. So, codependency, stunningly beautiful relationship between the mother and the son, which is also dysfunctional, and then slowly the father as well. The cast are all uniformly sensational. It's on at Wyndham's Theatre through until September. Music is great. I loved it. I cried. My ex, who never cries at anything, I turned at the end and there was like a red face and tears, and he can't stop talking about it and looking up videos for it. It's beautiful. I really urge people to go and see this.
Very good. That's at Wyndham's.
Yes.
Let's cover the Secret Garden at the open-air theatre, Regent's Park.
Yeah, Regent's Park Theatre, gorgeous setting, as we know, absolutely stunning, open amphitheatre, backdrop of the park. Secret Garden is all about the wonders of nature, the beauty of nature. And again, I have an issue with the Regent's Park open-air theatre working against the backdrop. So the set is primarily a wall, and not even a very attractive wall. You don't ever really... So when the garden starts flourishing and growing, it's planters on wheels. The shoots are just pieces of fabric pulled out of the earth. The flowers are all streamers.
That seems quite perverse.
So it's impressionistic, and it's kind of trying to create magic. It only really works once the sun comes down and the lighting and everything kick in. Also, you've got adults playing the children. So it's the story of a young girl coming back from India. She's 10 years old. Parents have died from cholera. She's angry and frustrated. She doesn't understand England. They've switched it so her mother and the boy's mother, who turns out to be her cousin, are Indian as well. So it brings in colonial themes. It's very much about disability, which back in the day when Mary Hodgkin Burness wrote it, was something to be overcome or, you know, not looked at. Here, they embrace it and they move it more back to actually supporting disability. So there's a lot of good in it. I had a problem with the two children being played by adults. Just doesn't really work for me. It's just too much. There's so many extraordinary child actors at the moment everywhere. It just feels a little bit like sort of adults having tantrums.
I'm going to cut you off there because I want you to know that your reviews are deeply influential. Because you told me to go to Swan Lake at Covent Garden.
Yes.
And on Friday I did. I went to the last night of the run. And I was lucky to see Natalia Osiopova, who's absolutely sensational, and Rhys Clark, who's a Scottish dancer.
Rising star, yeah.
Rising star. A family of 4 brothers who are all in the Royal Ballet, and it was absolutely sensational.
Good, yeah, I love it.
Thank you very much for your recommendation.
My pleasure.
It's been a great summer of Swan Lakes, has it not?
It has.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Stefan Kyriazis. So you're watching Michael Portillo on GB News, Britain's news channel. This is concluding the first hour of the programme, but don't go away. After the break, we'll be discussing whether Virginia Woolf's views are now unacceptable. And we're going to be discussing that with her great niece, Emma Woolf. And then, should celebrities use their privileged positions and voices to influence votes in our general election? And in our Taste of Britain segment, we will be savouring some of the best British ice creams. That's the scoop. Step.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For a chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday the 4th of July.
Only on GB News.
Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to the second hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo on GB News. The fearsome noonday sun beats down upon us mercilessly. By one of the paradoxes made possible by television, withdraw into the shade with us in order to achieve enlightenment. In other words, please spend the next hour with me as we expose ourselves unprotected by any UV factor to informed opinion on political, artistic and creative subjects. As France votes today possibly to install Marine Le Pen's party in office, and as Britain polls on Thursday, possibly to put Labour in Downing Street, are Britain and Europe moving in opposite directions? Or will both elections show a centrist party being smashed as voters concerned about immigration turn right? My panel will discuss. Are the views of the late great Virginia Woolf, who took her life in 1941, unacceptable? Can we protect ourselves with a QR code provided by Camden Council that will put her words into context, perhaps by explaining that the past was not the same as the present? Writer and broadcaster Emma Wolfe, the great niece of the acclaimed Bloomsbury Group writer, will be here to share her thoughts with no trigger warnings whatsoever. David Tennant wanted Kemi Badenoch to cease to exist, or at least to shut up. And Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling is struggling, she says, at this election to vote Labour, the party that she's always supported. Should celebrities weigh in on politics? My answer might be yes, if I agree with them. I'll be joined by the author and book editor of The Spectator World, Alexander Larman, to discuss the power or futility of celebrity endorsement. And finally, ice cream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream. Tomorrow begins National Ice Cream Month. I'll be joined by Hannah Harley-Young, creator of the podcast Crazy Sexy Food. Be prepared for the best scoop of this entire general election campaign. All of that ahead. But first, your headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Michael. 1 minute past midday, our top stories this hour. And first is some breaking news. Spanish police have called off the search for missing teenager Jay Slater in Tenerife. The 19-year-old from Lancashire vanished whilst walking to his accommodation on June 17th. The Guardia Civil spokesman said a short while ago that while the search operation has now finished, the case remains open. It comes just 2 days after the force appealed for expert volunteers to help explore rugged terrain. The Prime Minister is warning that Sir Keir Starmer could inflict irreversible damage on the UK within 100 days of entering Downing Street. In a Sunday Telegraph interview, Rishi Sunak warned that Labour's tax plans would bankrupt people in every generation. However, Labour says its first steps would be restoring economic stability and cutting NHS waiting lists. The attacks come as the party continues to lead the Tories in the polls by around 20 points ahead of Thursday's election. Pat McFadden, Labour's national campaign coordinator, told us Labour has been clear on its tax policies.
There is nothing in our plans that requires
Why can't you rule it out now,
tax
then?
increases.
OK, how about this? Will you increase council tax or re-band council tax?
Well, there's already, under the Tory plans, an assumption that council tax will go up under their plans.
OK, so will it go up under a Labour government?
There's nothing in our plans that requires council tax to go up.
Will you tax people's homes?
There is nothing in our plans that requires us to do this.
Can you rule out taxing people more to drive a car or to put petrol and diesel into a car? Can you rule that out?
There's nothing in our plans that requires us to do that. Now,
Okay, so nothing in our plans and ruling things out are two different things.
Well, meanwhile, the Sunday Times has endorsed Labour ahead of this week's election. In an editorial published today, the newspaper says that after 5 Prime Ministers and 7 Chancellors since 2016, the Conservatives have, quote, forfeited the right to govern. The paper has previously endorsed the Conservatives in every election since 2005. Well, Nigel Farage is addressing the largest mass meeting of Reform Party supporters today. The event at the Birmingham NEC is expected to have an audience of up to 5,000 people. Mr Farage has described the vote on Thursday as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rebuild broken Britain. It comes at the end of a difficult week for the Reform leader, who has dealt with multiple allegations about the behaviour of his candidates and activists. Here he is, speaking to Camilla Tominey earlier on this morning.
I've been leader of this for a month, OK? I inherited a start-up party that had almost no money and almost no staff, and said, volunteer, we want candidates. So we have finished up with some people who were rotten. I tried to fix it by getting a well-known, prominent, for X number 10 man. Who had a vetting company. We gave him 144 grand. He didn't do the job. So we have finished up with some people who are truly dreadful. I apologise for that, but it's not reflective of me and it's not reflective of the party.
The Lib Dems are pledging to give patients the legal right to see a GP within a week if they win the general election. Leader Sir Ed Davey also says patients would be guaranteed cancer treatment within 2 months of a diagnosis. It's part of a new patients' charter, which would enshrine new rights into the NHS constitution. It would also aim to bolster access to urgent appointments, ensuring that anyone in need sees a GP within 24 hours. Police in Greater Manchester have shot and killed an XL bully dog after it attacked a woman. Now, a warning, some viewers may find the following video distressing. Footage shared on social media shows officers firing at the dog multiple times as it ran through a residential street in Eccles. Officers were called to reports of a dangerous and out-of-control dog on Friday night after members of the public had failed to control the animal. The victim is still receiving treatment, and 2 men were arrested after allegedly confronting officers. In the United States, the White House is pushing back on reports that President Biden plans to discuss the future of his campaign with his family at Camp David today. It's after a report by NBC News that quoted several unnamed sources alleging that some senior party members are pushing for the president to stand aside, of course following his performance in a televised debate against Donald Trump. But officials say the trip was planned before the debate and denied that there was any serious discussion about the president standing down. England will face off against Slovakia later in Euro 2024 last 16 action. The two sides go head-to-head with a quarter-final place against Switzerland at stake. Harry Kane says he'll be at peak sharpness as he looks to find the back of the net, having only scored once in 3 games. And finally, the King is opening Balmoral to the public for the first time in the palace's history. From Monday, His Majesty will open the doors of his Scottish retreat, allowing a glimpse of royal family life in the Highlands. Visitors will be treated to a guided tour of the Aberdeenshire Castle, where successive monarchs since Queen Victoria have gone to relax. Rooms available for viewing will include the entrance hall, family dining rooms and the library. OK, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Ray Addison. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Roy Addison. France goes to the polls today. There it seems possible that the government and Prime Minister will be supplied by Marine Le Pen's party, the National Rally, which is regarded as being to the right of the spectrum. Meanwhile, on Thursday, it's anticipated that Britain's new government will be formed by Labour from the political left. Does this mean that Britain and the continent are moving in opposite directions? Or are the two elections part of the same pattern? In France, Emmanuel Macron's centrist party is likely to be smashed, and in Britain, the middle-of-the-road Conservatives face a similar fate, it seems. In each case, is failure to control immigration at the heart of the matter? And if so, do all mainstream parties in Europe face the same mortal danger? Could Labour, which may win a huge majority this week, in 5 years' time, also face extinction if it disappoints its voters by not controlling our borders? Joining me now to discuss this is the political editor for the Daily Express, Sam Lister, whose late train may or may not be a symptom of broken Britain. And I'm rejoined by political correspondent for The Spectator, James Heal, and former Labour advisor and political commentator, Stella Santikidou. Sam, welcome. What do you think? Do you think that the British and continental elections are the opposite, or are they the same thing?
I think they're the same thing, and I think it is about immigration. I think immigration is at the heart of it. And we know this because Michel Barnier, obviously familiar to your viewers as the chief Brexit negotiator on behalf of the European Union, he has repeatedly spoken out about the problems France is facing. He obviously was from France, is a French politician by background. He says that actually the failures of the Macron premiership are down to his inability to control migration, but more importantly, his inability to listen to people's concerns about it. Also, obviously, we know the different system over there means that he has the power of presidential decree, which he has used, which I think is something that voters have found very difficult to kind of take. And actually, it's very similar to Britain in many ways, in that it's northern France, it's working class communities in France who are disillusioned and are showing that at the ballot box.
James, do you agree that it's more the same thing than a different thing?
Yeah, I think there's a tendency across the world right now for both political volatility, with lots of new parties popping up and the old established parties coming under pressure from that, and also an anti-incumbency factor. I think right across the Western world what we're seeing is a lot of the governments who were sort of applauded for their time, their leadership during COVID, are actually now being kicked out of office because of the consequential effects of inflation and all the economic tax rises that have had to occur ever since. I would also just make the point that in the next sort of 15 months or so, it's entirely plausible that we could see every nation across the G7, apart from Britain, being led by someone of the right or hard right, as it were. And we've got elections coming up in Germany, in Canada and Japan next year. Keir Starmer suddenly could be moving to the left at a time when the rest of the continent and other places around the Western world are moving to the right.
Certainly in recent times we've seen I hate saying the far right, because some of these parties are quite complicated, but parties from the right of the spectrum doing well in Italy, France, Germany, Hungary, Finland, Sweden and the Netherlands. Now, Stella, you come with the benefit of coming from another country, coming from Greece to begin with. Do you buy this idea that there are similarities here across Europe or not?
No, I don't. I think there is one similarity I will come to, but firstly, I think they are completely different. You have to take each country on its own. Sure, European politics will have an impact on how the electorate looks at the European Union and how their leaders interact with the European Union. But apart from that, completely different histories. You cannot tell me that you can compare what's going on in Greece with what's going on in France, with what's going on in Germany. You may have broadly some more right-wing parties gaining power, let's say, in Germany as you do in France, but they're for very different reasons. And you're talking about countries that are very different politically, both in terms of economics and in terms of political emotion.
OK, I understand that these countries are different, of course. That's one of the things that makes me a Eurosceptic, by the way, that I don't think all these diverse people can be governed in common. But let me say to you that in many of these places, immigrants are arriving by boat, or having arrived in southern Europe by boat, they've crossed Europe to places like the Netherlands and Sweden and Finland, the countries that I've mentioned. And I dare say in other countries as well, they're finding that not only illegal immigration, but legal immigration is quite high. And is it not pretty clear that there is a reaction in the polls to this in all the countries that I've mentioned?
It's a failure of liberal leaders across the Western world right now, that they have failed to provide a strong story to their electorate about what is happening, to explain to their electorate what is happening and how they're going to take them wherever their vision is going to lead them. And this we see that both in the US and in European countries, it's the same thing. And it has to do more with leadership and with leaders looking at each other because of social media, because of the way that the politics of the American politics influences British politics and that influences European politics, and that's my translation of this effect. It's weak liberal leaders who cannot withstand the smallest whiff of populism from their electorate. The moment there is the smallest whiff, they get scared and they think that there is going to be a massive change in the polls, rather than sticking to their guns. And this is why we have had such bad governance, because they go from one side to the other.
Stella, let me feed your small whiff to Sam. Sam, four parties at this election are in favour of reducing immigration. So when we talk about the failure of Liberal leaders, you see the Labour Party is not saying at this election, we believe in immigration, we justify it, we think it's good for the economy, we're going to build the schools and the hospitals that are necessary. No. Labour is saying that it's going to reduce immigration. But one has the right to say, are they any more credible than the Conservatives? What are the policies that they're putting forward? So let me extend that to you and say, do you foresee a situation in 5 years' time where Labour, like the Conservatives, having ignored this issue, finds itself in peril?
I think that Labour has been quite clever in the fact it's talked about reducing immigration. It's signalled to voters, yes, we're on your side, we want to reduce migration, legal and illegal, but it's made no commitments whatsoever other than to reduce the numbers. Now, that could be by 1 or 100 or 150, and then they've completed their task. They've made no serious commitment in terms of how many legal migrants they would like to see annually, or how much they want to reduce the small boats crisis by. So it's very easy to meet that target because really it is not really a target.
But even if in 5 years' time they haven't literally broken a promise, if on the other hand they haven't dealt with immigration, is that going to be serious?
I think so, because people... part of the big frustration at this election is that the Prime Minister and previous Prime Ministers promised to sort out the small boats crisis, promised to bring down legal migration, and yet the numbers have risen, and people feel immensely frustrated with that. And if you think about how much the Conservative Party want to sort out those problems and have struggled for various reasons, namely courts, domestically and, in Europe, then how on earth are Labour going to sort out that problem when they don't have that same burning desire to tackle this issue? And so I think in 5 years' time, I think it will be an issue, because if the small boats crisis gets worse year on year, legal migration continues to rise. Obviously, we hit 700,000 last year. I think that is a huge, huge problem, because very quick and big changes in population cause real upset in local areas.
James, is it possible that historians will look back and say, what happened in this period is that the centre of the Conservative Party thought that it was more important to stay in the European Court of Human Rights than the survival of their party? Because, it rather looks as though the Conservative Party is going to be smashed this coming week. And one signal that it could have given would have been to leave the ECHR. But the leadership of the party and the centre ground of the party thought that that was absolutely unviable, impossible to do, even though they could see the disaster coming at the polls.
I think the debate on migration reminds me a little bit about what happened with Ted Heath and Margaret Thatcher on trade union reform, which, of course, Ted Heath had this big bill in 1972 to the Industrial Relations Act, which was to try and make the trade union subject to the courts. And, of course, that was seen as 10 years too soon, and then left to Margaret Thatcher after a series of crises to resolve and clean up the trade union issue. On the issue about small boats, what we're seeing right now is a lot of discussions and debates around things which are considered politically unpalatable, but which 10 years down the line, after, say, Labour gets kicked out of office in future Parliament, maybe we'll see them return to. And I think that the ECHR issue is fascinating, because it reminds me a bit of 97, where we saw half the Tory candidates in that election rule out joining the Euro, and 20 years later, of course, the Conservative Party was committed to Brexit. One of those candidates at the time was the young David Cameron. He was committed in his manifesto to ruling out the Euro, and of course he ended up being sort of overtaken by the kind of tides of Euroscepticism. And I think I look at the Conservative Party and I think that increasing scepticism towards Strasbourg and the ECHR is one of the trends we're going to see the next 10 to 20 years. So I suspect there could come a day where committing to leaving the ECHR is going to be something, just like we see in France. The youth of France right now don't have the memories of de Gaulle and Algiers, etc., and therefore much more receptive to Marine Le Pen's party.
Stella, have you been struck by this? As the Conservative Party has drifted towards what looks like an electoral disaster, that it couldn't contemplate leaving the ECHR, which would have been quite a powerful symbol that it was prepared to do something about immigration?
Brexit was a powerful symbol, and what good did that do? It didn't change anything at all, and I think that is what voters are reacting to, and politicians are still grasping.
When Boris said, let's get Brexit done, it won him the election. In fact, it won him a majority of 80. So you may have your views about how Brexit has worked out, and I will probably have contrary views. But as a slogan, let's get Brexit done, worked very well. I'm just putting it to you. If the slogan had been, we're serious, we're getting to grips with immigration, we've left the ECHR, that might have been quite a powerful slogan.
I don't think that for most people there is cut through with the ECHR. I don't think that for the average voter, that is even the one who is extremely concerned about immigration, I don't think there is cut through that it is because of the ECHR that we can't deal with the issue. Because at the end of the day, I don't think that this is going to solve it, and that's my opinion. But yeah, I don't think it's going to do them any good. I think on immigration that very often voters say, yes, we want lower immigration, but guess what? They also don't want higher prices, and these things often come hand in hand. And we see across Europe, whenever energy prices are going up, so does the support for right-wing parties. And if the UK doesn't deal with its infrastructure crisis and with its energy problem, which requires a lot of workers, and right now you have the electric grid, Hinkley Point C, all of them saying we cannot find enough construction workers, we pay them double, triple, and we still cannot find enough construction workers. Guess what? The public is going to turn more and more to the right, but their problem is not going to be solved.
Sam, very briefly, but I'll give you the sum up. To what extent do you think immigration has been the issue which has led the Conservative Party to where it is now and Reform UK to its position today?
Well, I think Reform have a very simple, clear message to deliver, and that's very powerful with voters. And obviously Nigel Farage is very popular in many parts of the country. But simple messages are very difficult to deliver on once you actually get into power. And obviously he will not be tested on those promises. And the Conservatives find themselves in that difficult situation of having to compete with this very simple message, but they potentially do have that thing where they will have to deliver on it if they do return to power. And I think that is the difficulty for them.
And that, I think, is a point in common across much of Europe, that the simplicity of the message coming from a party that may not be in power competes with the mainstream parties and can do the mainstream parties a lot of damage. What happens in France today, Sunday, and next Sunday will be absolutely fascinating. Many thanks indeed, Sam Lister, James Heal and Stella Shantikidou. After the break, we'll discuss Virginia Woolf. She was prominent after the Great War. She took her own life in 1941. Her attitudes and language reflected the Bloomsbury set period during which she lived, rather than Camden Council in 2024. Apparently her view should now be regarded as controversial, and a council-supplied QR code by her statue will inform you of the things that she said in the 20th century about which you might wish to be offended in the 21st. Stick with us.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Giovanni is axed following growing allegations of threatening and abusive behaviour.
We won't see his little toes dancing around the dance floor again, which is a shame.
Was it the BBC saying, you know, we've had some bad publicity about this star, do we need to maybe let him go? Or was it Giovanni himself saying that, you know, he's had to, with all the bad publicity and what's the allegations against him, he's walked away? We don't exactly know. But what we do know is that Amanda Abingdon, who he was coupled with last year on the last series of Strictly, left claiming that she had nasty behaviour from him in rehearsals when they were training for their routines. And she's also been diagnosed with PTSD, which she is blaming or claiming happened because of the training that she was put under Giovanni. It's very sad because I've met Giovanni on quite a few occasions, and he comes across as a very nice gentleman, actually, and the fans absolutely love him. And even though the allegations are out there against him, everybody I speak to in terms of the fans are on his side.
I mean, from the fans' point of view, they don't see what goes on behind the scenes. All they see is an incredibly gifted dancer who we're seeing footage of now.
It might come out later, but there's all sorts of things coming out because after Amanda came out and claimed all this behaviour against him, a male celebrity last week also came out and voiced their opinion. Yeah, a lot of fans will be gutted, but as you say, we don't know the full story yet as what's gone on.
And it's incredible pressure that no one's allowed to be, a duffer right from the start now.
I mean, it's one thing learning lines if you're an actor, but it's a different kettle of fish altogether if you're learning moves that you've never done before. So you've got...
The People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tormini.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, RGB News viewers and listeners for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Camilla Tominey. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. A statue of Virginia Woolf in Tavistock Square in London has had a QR code added by the local council that sets out her imperialist attitudes and offensive opinions. The QR code has been attached to the effigy of the author of Mrs. Dalloway and to the lighthouse in Bloomsbury. When scanned, it brings up a lengthy explanation of views highlighted as unacceptable. The measure is part of a scheme drawn up in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protests to address the connections between local statues and, quotes, racism, slavery, imperialism. It's part of a project which is backed by National Lottery funding to make meaningful connections between our diverse communities and Camden's public realm. Joining me is one of Virginia Woolf's last surviving direct relatives, her great-niece, author and broadcaster Emma Woolf. Welcome to GB News. Welcome back. Very briefly, a biography of Virginia Woolf.
So Virginia Woolf was obviously a famous novelist, a famous modernist novelist, born in 1882, who wrote throughout the early part of the 20th century. She wrote books such as To the Lighthouse, Mrs. Dalloway, The Waves, Between the Acts, lots and lots of books that are difficult but very, very interesting in terms of the modernism, that getting inside of daily lives rather than the outside, rather than the writing about the exterior the way that Dickens or Trollope did. Virginia Woolf was the writer that sort of moved things on, along with James Joyce and people like that. She was married to Leonard Woolf, my great uncle, who was a famous kind of political thinker, Fabian, a member of the Fabian Society, and they were part of the Bloomsbury Group, which is a group of writers, thinkers, economists, people like Maynard Keynes, Lytton Strachey, Dora Carrington. So very, very influential artists and writers that were living in this area, kind of now governed by Camden Council, in the early 20th century.
That's a brilliantly succinct biography. What are the sorts of offensive things that she's alleged to have said? Sorry, what are the things that she said that are alleged to be offensive?
Well, Camden Council are making sort of slightly vague comments about offensive attitudes, imperialist attitudes. I'd just like to drop in there, imperialist attitudes. Virginia's grandfather, Sir James Stephen, actually drafted the Slavery Abolition Act in 1833, so that is absolutely ludicrous. She's been called anti-Semitic, which is odd because she married a Jew. The thing about Virginia, she's irreverent. She's a warm writer. She's curious about people. She's not a racist. She's not vicious. She's not spiteful.
Use the N-word?
People did then. We are talking about 1882.
Use the N-word.
I think she may.
And I think at one point she described somebody's arm as being as black as a monkey's or something like that.
OK, but we need to remember she was writing 142 years ago. Camden Council and you, in a way, are expecting of her the standards of 2024, these ultra-woke standards, the Black Lives Matter kind of trope where everything is politically correct. That is not the way it was. She was a Victorian. In fact, she was socially very progressive. She was a feminist. She wrote A Room of One's Own, which we now refer to, A Room of One's Own. No, Virginia was the one who said that a woman, if a woman can write and earn her own money, she needs a room of her own and £500 a year or whatever it was. She married into a Jewish family at a time when that wasn't, all of this stuff. She's been called a homophobe. She's been called homophobic when actually she was passionately in love with Vita Sackville-West. She may well have had a lesbian love affair. We don't know that for sure. There's so many ludicrous...
And some of the people you mentioned in the Bloomsbury set were certainly gay.
They were certainly gay, and they were extremely liberated. And that experiment that they did in the early 20th century, where Virginia and her sister lived alone with other young men. They made comments to each other. They had dinner parties. They made comments about sex. They talked about love and about life and about... They were incredibly progressive. So to make her out to be some kind of racist, anti-Semitic woman is just wrong. And I've read her letters and I've read her diaries. I haven't just read the books. it's very revealing, and people... The reason I object to it is because when you attach something like offensive attitudes, it mud sticks.
It could be said it's just a QR code. I mean, no one is obliged to scan this QR code. They haven't taken down her statue. They haven't put up a big placard next to her statue. They put up a QR code.
Mm-hmm.
Is it not a bit snowflake-ish to object to QR codes? Can't you get over yourself?
Look, it's the first time I've ever been called a snowflake, so that's something. I suppose there are two things there. Firstly, I don't want people standing by the statue staring at their mobile phone. I want them to stand in Tavistock Square, as they do now, with old copies of To the Lighthouse, and I want them to think about Virginia and about her writing and about what she went through and about how much she loved London and about the world wars that were going on and everything that she wrote about, because London was an incredibly special place to Virginia Woolf. And that's why we get thousands of American tourists and Japanese tourists and Italian and European tourists from around the world coming for the Bloomsbury Trail, coming to Camden. And Camden Council should be celebrating that. They should be making a big deal about the fact they have Bloomsbury. The other thing is, there is an irony, Michael. This is a woman who spent her entire life trying to express what was within her, trying to capture in words what it feels like to be a human being, to be alive, to be depressed, to be sad, to be happy, to be in love. And she's reduced to a statue with a QR code attached. So, yes, it does matter. To me, it matters very much.
Well, and I think another answer to the QR code point is that once you do reveal the QR code, it makes all these allegations.
Yes.
And as you say, the allegations at least need to be seen in the context of the time.
Of the time, and contextualise it. And just remember, 142 years ago, we've made such progress in terms of how we describe people, the language that we use, the sensitivity around colour and race and difference. But also, it's inaccurate. Virginia loved difference. She wasn't someone who just spent time in her socially... I mean, she was upper middle class, for goodness sake. She could have just had these posh dinner parties all throughout her life. She rambled through the streets. She talked to the housemaids. She loved difference. She loved different people and curious things that were happening in the streets. So I think it's misleading. I don't think it's just, oh, it's no big deal. I actually think it's misleading to attach words like offensive to her. It really does leave a taint for me. It leaves a taint. Look, I'm a Woolf. I'm going to defend her to the death.
Well, that's exactly
I adore Virginia. I'm fiercely proud of the Woolf family and the Woolf heritage, and I will fight for that forever. But it's wrong as well.
Fighting for the Wolf family name.
Of course, absolutely.
With lupine ferocity. Thank you very much indeed, Emma Wolf. Now, I have to read this. A Camden Council spokesman said, representing Bloomsbury was a pilot project to help our communities and visitors develop a greater understanding of statues and memorials in the borough. Last year, we worked with specialists, artists and communities to explore and examine the lives and works of Virginia Woolf, Bertrand Russell and Noor Inayat Khan for this pilot project. These are available via the Camden People's Museum website, which can be accessed via QR code on site. We're currently developing plans to interpret further statues and memorials in the borough. Thanks again to Emma Wolf. After the break, do celebrities sway people's decisions at the ballot box? I'll be speaking to the author Alexander Larman. But first, with the latest headlines, Ray Addison.
Thanks, Michael. 12:32, our top stories. Spanish police have called off the search for missing teenager Jay Slater in Tenerife. The 19-year-old from Lancashire vanished whilst walking to his accommodation on June 17. Comes just 2 days after the force appealed for expert volunteers to help explore rugged terrain. Nigel Farage is due to address a gathering of Reform UK supporters in Birmingham soon. Earlier, he defended his record as Reform UK's leader, telling GB News that he'd inherited a start-up party. It comes at the end of a difficult week for Reform, amid multiple allegations about the behaviour of candidates and activists. The PM is insisting that an election victory for the Conservatives is still possible, despite polls predicting heavy defeats. In an interview for the Sunday Telegraph, Rishi Sunak warned that Labour's tax plans would bankrupt people in every generation. However, Labour says its first steps would be restoring economic stability and cutting NHS waiting lists. The party continues to lead the Tories in the polls by around 20 points ahead of Thursday's election. In the US, the White House is pushing back on reports that President Biden plans to discuss the future of his campaign with his family at Camp David today. It's after a report by NBC News that quoted several unnamed sources, alleging that some senior party members are pushing for the president to stand aside after his performance in a televised debate against Donald Trump. Officials at the White House are saying the trip was planned before the debate. And the King is opening Balmoral to the public for the first time in its history. From Monday, Charles will open the doors of his Scottish retreat, allowing a glimpse of royal family life in the Highlands. Rooms available for viewing will include the entrance hall, family dining rooms and the library too. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Ray Addison. More from Michael in just a moment.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, quite a drizzly start, but we will see some sunshine breaking through the cloud with temperatures around about average. Plenty of rain and drizzle across the southeast where we see this frontal system eventually clear its way through. And then we do see a ridge of high pressure building, which means generally settled conditions for the afternoon. Through the course of Sunday then, quite a cloudy picture for most of us, but it will be largely dry. Though we will start to see some showers break out across northern parts of England. Nothing particularly heavy though. And later into the afternoon we'll see some sunshine break through that cloud with the best of the temperatures across the southeast. Highs of 22, maybe even 23 Celsius as we see the sunshine break through. Now, through the course of the evening then, we will start to see some sunshine, particularly across parts of Devon and Cornwall, but elsewhere, a fair amount of cloud around, largely dry though. A few showers still across northern England, not really easing away until later into the night, and then some sunshine poking through that cloud across Northern Ireland. Through Scotland, still plenty of cloud around, a few showers feeding into the Northern Isles, but for most, plenty of dry weather around to end the weekend. Into the evening, a bit of a change as we start to see some outbreaks of rain push their way in from the west. Once again, nothing particularly heavy, but it will lead to quite a damp morning for some of us to start the new working week. Elsewhere, though, largely dry, a mix of cloud and some clear spells. Where you do catch those prolonged clear spells, feeling a little bit cooler than of late, but most towns and cities holding into the double figures. For Monday then, generally quite an unsettled picture. We'll see those outbreaks of rain continue to push their way across parts of England, staying largely dry across central and southern England, just some patchy areas of rain at times. But once again, the best of the temperatures across the southeast, highs of 21, possibly even 22, depending on how much sunshine breaks through. Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
Welcome back. Political star power can add another dimension to election campaigning. This week, we've seen David Tennant attacking the Business Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, noting he wished that she did not exist. Dawn Butler, the Labour politician, supported Mr Tennant's views. As Michael Deacon commented in the Daily Telegraph, a woman praising a man for telling a woman to shut up after she'd spoken up for women seems bizarre. Harry Potter author and women's rights activist J.K. Rowling has also accused Labour of abandoning women in favour of trans people and has expressed the view that she will struggle to vote for Labour under Sir Keir Starmer. Do celebrities still have the power to influence the electoral vote? Joining me now to discuss this further is the author and books editor of The Spectator, Alexander Larman. Alexander, great to see you. Did they ever have the power to influence? Is there any evidence at all that celebrity endorsement switches votes?
Well, I think if you look back at the 1990s, certainly when Labour was becoming an electoral force in the modern era, there's definitely a sense that Tony Blair wanted to get people on side like Noel Gallagher and Damon Albarn because he thought they could speak more effectively to the youth vote than he could. And to an extent, he was right, because, I mean, if we go back to 97, I mean, I know it's a year that has unpleasant memories for you, but for some people would actually see it as being a time that the youth vote and the older vote coalesced. But this time around, I mean, I do not think there's been a sense of this election that there have been people coming forward and offering endorsements where you'd think that's genuinely unexpected.
Well, 1997 is an interesting year because whatever the combination was that Tony Blair put together, it led to a great deal of enthusiasm, optimism, I would say quite naive optimism, but nonetheless it was in the air. And, you know, the song, Things Can Only Get Better, the celebrity endorsements, all these things added to an idea that to be on the side of Labour, to be with Tony Blair was the right place to be. It was most socially acceptable. It was fashionable, if you like. Most of those considerations don't seem to apply now, do they? Keir Starmer doesn't have the same vibe at all.
Well, I mean, we're speaking of a Glastonbury Festival going on.
Yes.
There's no sense of a chant, "Oh, Keir Starmer," or something like that. Whereas 7 years ago, that's exactly what happened for Jeremy Corbyn. And what was interesting about Corbyn is love him or loathe him. He had a cult-like following, and people like the rapper Stormzy were only too keen to endorse him. And of course, these days, Stormzy's kept very quiet, because actually what's interesting about Keir Starmer is he doesn't have that appeal. He doesn't have these people coming forward and saying how brilliant he is, but you have slightly older people like Sir Elton John and Imelda Staunton who have been endorsing Labour. And of course, every endorsement is welcome, because anyone saying, especially in an election like this, please vote for this particular party, it's going to be seen as something that you want to do. But certainly I don't get the same sense of enthusiasm behind a lot of these. I mean, the main thing we've seen was a long letter to the Times, which was essentially concentrating on Labour's arts policy. That's not quite the same thing as saying how wonderful Labour's going to be for the country. So I think that while we can see there are precisely no endorsements towards the Conservative Party in this election.
While you were talking there, we were seeing, without the sound, we were seeing Elton John endorsing the Labour Party. But you mentioned Jeremy Corbyn along the way there. I mean, it was an interesting moment when people were chanting for him at Glastonbury. But what was the result? He lost 2 elections.
But of course, the funny thing is, in 2017, he had this weird messianic following. And people like us who were saying, obviously this is delusional, was soon amply vindicated. But of course the fact is that nonetheless he was speaking to this sector of the electorate who perhaps feel like they've been left out, that they haven't been spoken to. And I think with Starmer he's going to really struggle in terms of connecting with the younger vote as a person, because there's nothing that they've done throughout the election that you think, oh, that's really going to speak to people between 18 and 30. It's interesting that Angela Rayner is probably a more popular figure amongst that kind of age, because she seems more accessible.
One of the things about celebrities, a bit like animals and children, is that they're not easy to control. I mean, the David Tennant thing is an example of how, you know, the ball bounces very unpredictably once a celebrity has entered the fray. I mean, do you think Labour are feeling pleased that David Tennant has made the remarks he did about Kemi Badenoch? I rather doubt it.
Well, it's interesting because we have both David Tennant and J.K. Rowling, who are both historically very high-profile Labour supporters, and neither of them have said things that are going to be helpful to the Labour Party over the last few days. And obviously, in the case of J.K. Rowling, it's carrying on the long tradition of her comments on women's rights. But in the case of Tennant, who has generally been a man who's shied away from this kind of public controversy and has made a career on being Britain's Britain's favourite actor, I would argue he's done something very, very stupid, because in fact it's now very easy to tar him as a misogynist, tar him as a racist, whatever else you want to call him. And this may or may not be fair, but celebrity like politics is an unfair business.
Well, it is extraordinary that people who are very distinguished in one walk of life, I think of people in business, for example, when they get entangled in politics, can behave in very naive ways. It's as though observing politics from a distance, they have one set of assumptions about it. When they actually get close to the tar baby, they find that they get embroiled in a way that they didn't predict and they don't like.
But of course, one of the problems, especially with actors, is that they've spent their entire lives working from scripts. And if you take the script away, sometimes they start speaking absolute rubbish. But then on the other hand, we have to look at somebody like J.K. Rowling saying that she found it hard to support Labour. And under normal circumstances, that would be a disaster because she was so associated with the Labour Party under Brown and even to people like Ed Miliband. And for somebody like that, the world's best-selling author, to be either withdrawing or at the very least not giving her support. But it just shows that the state of politics is in now that actually doesn't really existentially matter.
Well, I don't know. I've been impressed by her courage because she was speaking about these matters when it was always almost a thing for which you get excommunicated or cancelled, saying some of the things that she said. So I think possibly she has made a difference in politics. And maybe the question about whether you're saying something courageous that sticks out from the crowd or whether you're simply saying something which you think is going to go down well with your audience, maybe that's where the difference lies.
That's the David Tennant Rowling axis, isn't it?
Exactly. Alexander Larman, thank you very much indeed. After the break, as the summer heat begins to affect us, I'll be sampling some of the best ice cream in town. I'll be joined by the creator of the Crazy Sexy Food podcast, Hannah Harley-Young, who will be with me for our Taste of Britain. It's a GB News scoop.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The University of Cambridge has told students to stop flirting with staff under a new policy banning sexual relationships with professors. The new rules, which come into force next month, beginning of July, include a warning against behaviour that could be interpreted as flirtatious. University staff have been told they must report any behaviour that could constitute a student making advances towards a personal, particularly intimate relationship with them. If you're a tutor, how do you interpret what is flirting and what is just sort of like having a bit of banter?
In fact, we've got some
very nice trousers, by the way.
Thank you.
You see, you didn't even recognise.
Oh, I didn't.
Very well.
He's got
I think I'm blushing now. I'm blushing.
So, what's flirting? What's me complimenting your very well-fitting trousers? Yeah.
Well, there is a line, because obviously when you're 18 and you go to university, it might be the first time you're away from home. It might be the first time that you're open to maybe a bit of a nightlife, social activity, drinking and all the rest of it. On the flip side, I know a couple who, this pupil ended up dating their professor, and they've been together for about sort of 15 years now. So I used to go after lectures with my professor and the whole seminar. We used to go to the pub afterwards, and I became very good friends with, she was a mature student. She was on the very, very far left of political. You wondered where that was going for a second, didn't you?
We're both reading a huge sigh of relief.
Very quick for you, Joe. We're running out of very nice trousers as well. We're running
Thank you, not as snug as Charlie. I think you've got to have some rules in place that there's no abuse of power. Policing it's difficult. We ought to be in a position where you can say, get off, back off, or, banter's fine. Actually, I hate that word. I hate it almost as much as woke. Go on, email in.
Thank you very much. I'm flirting with both.
The People's Channel.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited,
We'll be here with you.
following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News,
Britain's election channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. They say that you cannot buy happiness, but you can buy ice cream, and that's pretty much the same thing. Its origin likely dates back to when Nero was emperor of Rome. There's evidence that ice or snow were harvested then and honey or other flavourings were added to make a sweet cold confection. And even before that, Alexander the Great supposedly enjoyed icy drinks that had been flavoured with honey or nectar. Perhaps my next guest has her own origin story. Joining me now with great scoops is the creator of the Crazy Sexy Food podcast, Hannah Harley-Young. Hannah, great to see you back here again.
Thank you for having me.
How have you selected the ice creams that you're going to put before us today?
It was a difficult job. Someone had to do it. I've actually chosen two brands that are based in London that I personally love. We've got Ruby Violet here, quirky ice cream parlour in King's Cross, owned by a ex-fashion photographer. And she set it up and named the parlour after her maternal grandmother. And she specialises in really exciting flavours. So here you have, I'm going to read out some of the flavours. You've got, this is an award-winning blackcurrant sorbet.
The colours, I was holding these up,
vivid,
obviously,
aren't they?
Because the colours are so
beautiful.
Vivid. Let me just show the camera some of these other unbelievably lovely
beautiful
colours.
This one is mint and cucumber, which I think is quite refreshing, a nice palate cleanser. And then this one, the pink one, is a raspberry rose and prosecco. She also specialises in ice cream desserts. So we've got a Jaffa bomb in the middle, which is a bit like a Jaffa cake. We've got an ice cream sundae at the end, which is with a bit of a twist with sesame ice cream.
Right. Let us taste some of these. And please take out
yes,
your
I'm going
as
to
well.
do some as well. I'm going to try the prosecco one because,
yes.
well, why not?
Wasn't it something in prosecco? You seem to have lighted on the prosecco in particular.
Raspberry, rose, and prosecco. And that is beautiful.
Can you taste the prosecco?
I can actually.
And what did you tell me this one was? Blackcurrant.
This is blackcurrant. That's award-winning. Here we go. What do you think? The colour is.
I think it's absolutely marvellous.
Yeah. I really love them. This other brand is a new pop-up in central London called Gelato.
Which one are you pointing
it's
at now?
these two here.
Oh, yes.
So this is actually owned by a master chocolatier called Anish Popat. And these two that I've got for you here, this is kulfi, which is inspired by the famous Indian ice cream. But this is his take. This is caramelised white chocolate, pistachio, saffron, cardamom and fennel seed.
It's beautifully.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And this is
beautifully
his
spicy.
This is his
and very
ode.
reminiscent of a kulfi.
Oh really? Okay, good. This is his ode to Wimbledon, which starts next week. This is strawberry and basil with fresh basil leaf.
Why do you think we're so keen on ice cream? What is it about?
Well, I think, do you know what? I think it's such a happy food. You know, when we talk about ice cream, it puts a smile on our faces. It reminds us of summer, you know, which is a really lovely season to be in. I mean, we've just about got it at the end of June. And I also think it's got a nostalgic side to it as well. Like, I can think about me as a child sort of running to the ice cream van, getting a 99 with a flake when it used to cost 99p. And, you know, it's just got so much fun behind it. It's not serious. You can play with it. It's a laugh.
You still hear those ice cream vans today,
yes.
Amazingly. But, I mean, these are now very sophisticated ice creams.
Yes.
We're not talking here about vanilla or chocolate. We're talking about very subtle flavours. By the way, I mean, what kind of prices are we talking about here? Are these correspondingly expensive?
I mean, you know, we live in a world where things are not cheap and food is not at its cheapest at the moment, and that's due to various reasons. You know, cost of living, it's to do with produce. You know, these particular companies are focusing on fantastic ingredients, and you can tell that from trying it now. You know, you are actually tasting that cucumber and that mint.
Yeah.
You know, it's not artificial. It's not been processed in a factory. These are small batch businesses, and that's why I love supporting them as well.
That one is extremely cold. Let's turn to this one that looks like a choc ice.
Yes.
What did you tell me about this one?
OK, so this is a Royale Mint Chocolate Bouillon Bar, and it's got...
It's perfectly clear that this is going to fly across
I know, I'm nervous.
if I do this.
Let's see what we're going to... Oh, here we go. Oh, no, there we go.
No, I think it's...
So, I mean, this is obviously an elevated version of the choc ice.
Yeah.
I mean, did you used to eat choc ices when you were younger?
Yeah, absolutely.
They were just they were so much fun. I used to, that was sort of like the reward for eating all of your dinner. You know, that was... Let's look in the middle of that, because there's a lot going on there. Oh, gosh, OK. That's got a peppermint fondant. Oh, that's a perfect... That was, people pay a lot of money to try and get that drip. That was perfect.
Marvellous.
So, you know, there's lots of excitement with ice cream. I think something that is really special for me is this. Now, a lot of people may not have seen this. This is called Faluda. This is the Iranian version of Faluda. Indians have a very different version of Faluda, which is more of an ice cream. Now, I know you mentioned sort of the historical side of ice cream, but there is another sort of legend that it actually originates in Persia, sort of around 550 BC.
Let me have some of that. I'm going to have the yellow one.
Try this one.
Because
okay.
I know that's flavoured with saffron.
Yes. So this is a really simple, again, just sort of, yeah, there we go. This is sort of like a sorbet or like a granita. So it's ice that has been sort of soaked in rosewater syrup, which I'm sure you're going to get. These little, I don't know if you can pick it up in the camera, there is very small little vermicelli noodles.
Good heavens.
What do you think?
I think it's all fabulous. Hannah, thank you so much. We're absolutely running out of time.
That's OK.
Hannah Harley-Young, welcome back to GB News. Thank you so much for being with us. And thank you also to all my guests who've been with us today. I'm going to take a break. I'll be back hosting here at 11 a.m. in a fortnight's time. Now, this week, please remember that many millions in the world live under dictatorships. You this week have the right to vote. Please regard it as a precious privilege and enjoy exercising your democratic right. Coming up next, GB News Sunday with Dawn Neeson. May the rest of your Sunday be restful. We're going to continue to attack these ice creams.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Well, quite a drizzly start, but we will see some sunshine breaking through the cloud with temperatures around about average. Plenty of rain and drizzle across the southeast where we see this frontal system eventually clear its way through. And then we do see a ridge of high pressure building, which means generally settled conditions for the afternoon. Through the course of Sunday then, quite a cloudy picture for most of us, but it will be largely dry. Though we will start to see some showers break out across northern parts of England. Nothing particularly heavy though. And later into the afternoon we'll see some sunshine break through that cloud with the best of the temperatures across the southeast. Highs of 22, maybe even 23 Celsius as we see the sunshine break through. Now, through the course of the evening then, we will start to see some sunshine, particularly across parts of Devon and Cornwall, but elsewhere, a fair amount of cloud around, largely dry though. A few showers still across northern England, not really easing away until later into the night, and then some sunshine poking through that cloud across Northern Ireland. Through Scotland, still plenty of cloud around, a few showers feeding into the Northern Isles, but for most, plenty of dry weather around to end the weekend. Into the evening, a bit of a change as we start to see some outbreaks of rain push their way in from the west. Once again, nothing particularly heavy, but it will lead to quite a damp morning for some of us to start the new working week. Elsewhere, though, largely dry, a mix of cloud and some clear spells. Where you do catch those prolonged clear spells, feeling a little bit cooler than of late, but most towns and cities holding into the double figures. For Monday then, generally quite an unsettled picture. We'll see those outbreaks of rain continue to push their way across parts of England, staying largely dry across central and southern England, just some patchy areas of rain at times. But once again, the best of the temperatures across the southeast, highs of 21, possibly even 22, depending on how much sunshine breaks through.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£30,000 in tax-free cash.